So, Raffaela de Marte, European elections are coming up, the first elections after a period in which the European Union went through multiple crises, let's say. What are the main messages that the European Parliament sends in this precise context?
The European Parliament is running a campaign that is called the Use Your Vote in order to mobilize citizens and encourage them to take part in the elections, because these elections are probably the most important that the European Parliament has ever held. Every election is important, but the context, as you mentioned, the geopolitical context, international sphere, changed very quickly and in an unexpected way in these last years. And this world of complexity requires a strong Europe and a strong voice of the European Union as a continent to be able to deal with problems that are complex. I'm thinking of the security and defense and the wars at our borders in Ukraine, but also in the Mediterranean. I'm thinking, of course, of the possibility of enlarging this European Union to the new countries that want to join and that we have committed to include. I'm thinking of how to finance the green transition in a way that is just and socially acceptable. All this requires a strong voice of the European Parliament and a sense of direction that only the citizens can indicate on the 9th of June of this year.
Very important elections, but the dominant theme, as seen in the last period, seems to be about the risk of the rise of extremist parties, populist parties. Will these parties be able to strengthen the extremist pole, let's say, it so much as to affect the agenda of the European Parliament? What are, I don't know, the working scenarios for the European Parliament?
We cannot predict how the elections will go, because there is only one protagonist in this election, and is the citizen and its vote. So we are not going to make a campaign speculating on this party or other party. However, it is clear that we need a constructive majority, because, as I said, around us there are many complex issues. The European Union has been strong in these years, and we see from the Eurobarometer, from the polls we do, that citizens understand that the European Union has a strong impact in their daily life, and therefore we need to continue building. And probably the European Union will have to face even more difficult topics, and they have to deliver to the citizens. And therefore it's where you need parties that work together, because this is a proportional system in which not only the political belonging, but also the national balance is needed, and then you have to negotiate with the governments, and therefore you need a majority that builds on these foundations to construct this last mile of the EU.
Young people are a special audience for the European Parliament, for the European Union. How do you target them? What messages work for them? Because I've told you before, I have a daughter, she's 21, and if I am concerned about the war in Ukraine, she's concerned about the house prices, for example.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and we see it also in the Eurobarometer we published last week, that topics that are very interesting for the average population are less for the young people. And whereas, for example, climate change remains number one priority for young people, the fight against inequalities, gender inequalities, inclusion, diversity is much more important for younger people than average Europeans, and the same with the future of Europe, the dimension of building a future for the European Union. So if young people want that these topics that affect them, and as you said also jobs, the creation of jobs, and is prioritized in the agenda of the next European Parliament, they will have to go to vote for those candidates and those parties who represent these issues and bring them to the political life of the European Union. So, as you said, we are building a campaign that talks to all European citizens, but we want to talk to young people in particular, because their interest in the European elections is lower than the average of the European population. However, they show a much higher interest in these years. In the last years, there is also from young people an awareness that the European sphere counts for them. So we are working, I can explain, we are working, first of all, we are working a lot with content creators and digital platforms. For example, we have established a cooperation now with the main platforms for them to relay the most important information about the elections and to give credible and trustable information. We, as I said, involve content creators on a daily basis so that they get the news out, because young people don't get their information from traditional media, but rather from these sources, social media and content creators. And I would like to mention also we have a platform that is called together.eu that gathers people who don't only want to vote, but also to activate themselves and be active part in this campaign and help spreading the message among people of their own age. And finally, in a few weeks ago, we opened a TikTok account because we understood that the very young people get their information through TikTok. We were present on all the other platforms, but TikTok was the last one. And I think it's very important because from the level of comments and questions we get from there, we see that kids and very, very young children have an interest in the EU.
Yeah, but what about the fake news? What about the third parties who can speculate? TikTok, social media.
This exists. It will increase in the next 6 weeks ahead of the European elections, for the simple fact that we saw that every national election was targeted by disinformation and attempts to, let's say, disintegrate the rules. Yeah, exactly. Polarization and also seeding doubt about the democratic system, the regularity of the vote, how the vote is counted, for example. These narratives that go towards don't vote because anyway they will decide for you. Anyway, elections are rigged. So this is important to be on those platforms because then we can see what happens there and we can engage in the discussion with people to take the space for real facts, for democratic debate, for the values that the European Union defends. And I would like to say also about young people that it is very clear that what is at stake in these elections is not only the sense of the policies that we will orient with our vote, but also the quality of our democratic model. That this, we are celebrating in these days the 20 years of the enlargement to countries that include Romania, and we are very happy. But it is not so long ago that this freedom and the democratic way of doing things and just building a consensus by talking to each other and listening to each other and coming to common solution was not the way. And we see that another way of doing things is becoming popular, and it's very aggressive, and it's not only outside the European Union, but even in some member states, a tendency to say, but it's more simple when we decide alone, when we don't talk to each other, and we just take decisions. And this is not the way that the European democracy is built on. We are built on freedom of speech, of the values. So young people that give this for granted should understand that this is very fragile and that via voting and via taking active part in the political life and civil life of their countries and of the Europe, they nurture this democratic model. That is the qualificative model of the European Union.
Yeah, but as you said, there are many politicians who are speculating their fears more than their hopes. And we have young people who are voting now for the first time in their life after 4 years of multiple crises, pandemic crisis, war, economic crisis.
Yes, of course, but I think the European Union has always represented a project of hope, a project of unity, a project of listening to each other and finding what is the middle ground, even when we seem very different and this hope needs to represent some model also for the future, because as I said, the way of doing things that is maybe more complex It's not simple, but nevertheless it guarantees the best level of freedom, the best level of democratic life of our countries, and I think the best quality of being together as human beings. So,
Okay, thank you very much, and finger crossed for the elections.
yes, thank you.